immigration's really broken. Immigration's a mess.
Often asylum seekers get called illegal immigrants. They're not illegal immigrants. They're actually in a legal process.
The people who come in every day to see us, we have lovely people, we have some people who are not so lovely, but they're just people who are trying to get on with their lives.
Hi, welcome to Changing Suits. My name's Val.
And my name's Taj.
On this week's episode, we wanted to look into an issue that's been coming up on the news recently quite a lot, and actually find out the truth, because I'm not the biggest fan of media, as many people know, whether it's social or just general media, but we do want to talk to organisations to find out what the truth is. Okay, so today we're joined by Nan Baines and Claire Garrett, who are from the Harbour Project. Hi ladies, how are you today?
We're good, thank you.
Lovely.
Hi.
Can you explain a bit about what the Harbour Project does? Because I've left this intro very much open. Usually I explain a bit about what we're talking, but I want to go straight to you. What is the Harbour Project all about?
Okay, so we're a charity based in Swindon, and we support asylum seekers and refugees. So when people who've claimed asylum are dispersed to Swindon, the housing providers refer them to our organisation, where we can register people and then offer them support. And that can be to help them with things like finding solicitors, to access some of the activities we have at Harbour. And it can be also to help them get to meet other people in Swindon. So we offer an advice service for people who've claimed asylum.
Let's go right back to the start. This might sound like a silly question because you're in this realm. What does asylum seekers and refugees actually mean?
Okay, so asylum seekers are people who've claimed asylum, who have fled their country for fear of persecution, and then they claim asylum when they come to this country. Refugees in our context are people who have then been granted leave to remain, so they've got their status, so they can live in the UK.
So quite a lot of people would say we're getting a lot of asylum seekers, and this is in the news, and we're hitting the topic right at the beginning. Why are they coming to the UK compared to any other country? Now, this is a very hot topic, so it'd be really interesting to see what you say.
So it is really interesting, isn't it? That why does everybody come to the UK? And I suppose the first thing to say is not everybody does come to the UK. There's about 82.5 million people on the move around the world, and from all sorts of countries. And the majority of those people probably go into another part of their home country. They may go across a border, and some people then cross the sea and travel further. And I think actually this is a global phenomenon that is likely to increase, through whether that's war, oppression, famine, or declared climate change. People are on the move, and people have always been on the move. So of that 82.5 million people that are on the move, which by the way is about the population of the UK, Ireland and Belgium, last year it was about 75,000 people claimed asylum in the UK, and the number of people who were then granted asylum in the UK is less than 20,000. The number of people who across Europe, for example, Germany takes about 4 times as many asylum seekers as we do in the UK, and France about twice as many, and Spain and other countries take far more. And by head of population, I think across the EU, we're about 17th by head of population. So not everybody comes to the UK. People go to lots of other countries too.
And it's interesting that you've said that, because as you can see from the start of it, it's a case of, well, what are we told on the media and what is actually the truth? And that is one thing that is very prominent. Oh, everyone comes to the UK, which clearly, looking at the figures, isn't quite true. However, with the fact that they come to the UK, there is, and we hear it on the news all the time, great danger as to, crossing over to the UK. And this again may sound like a very silly question, but it's such an interesting topic that I don't know very much about. How bad can it be in their countries to want to risk their lives to come over to the UK?
And I think you just summed it up there. What is it that would make you leave your home, your family, all of your possessions? And for some of our families, that other family members have paid for them to make that journey. So you're potentially paying to never see your child again. You're going to give all of your life savings never to see your son ever again. And then people make a most horrendous journey across multiple countries, and as you say, many of them ending in a boat. What is it that makes you stand on a beach in northern France and say, the only option I've got in my life now is to get in that boat and take the risk of crossing that sea? So as Nan was describing at the beginning there, we often say actually to the people that we support that we're not the Home Office, we're not the police, we're not the solicitors, we're not the people who make a decision about their cases. So we don't get involved in the nitty-gritty of what has happened to that person. But what we do know is something very dramatic has happened in their life to force people to make that journey. It's not something somebody's just decided to get out of bed one morning and decide, I'll have a bit of an adventure, I'll cross however many countries and get on a small dinghy, and perhaps those great people in the UK are going to give me a council house when I get there. The reality is nothing like that.
I think also for people to be risking that with their children as well on board, I mean, you must be pretty desperate to be making that kind of journey with your children, knowing that there's a possibility that your boat could, you could drown on that journey. So people must be really desperate to be doing that.
So profession-wise, who are the kind of people that are coming over? Because there is this assumption of, oh, they're just coming here to get our benefits, live in the hotels that we're paying for. So what is their professional background? Obviously, you can't say every single one.
Everything. Absolutely everything. So we've got about 1,400 people from around 67 different countries from 0 to 78. So sometimes people say, tell us about the people you support. There you go. That's the demographic. There will be some people, as Nan said, who are children and families, some people who have been students, but then we have other people who've had very well-paid professional careers, and whether that's medics, engineers, in all sorts of journalists and all sorts of different aspects of life. And actually what is interesting is often it's somebody's career that might have got them into the situation of needing to flee. It's people who are, maybe they've spoken out against their regime or spoken out against the government or their way of life, and people who, for example, are journalists who've got a bit too close to the action.
Oh wow.
To make that journey.
See, and this is something that is missed. Just the fact that you've said, it could be professionals that are medical and, the journalists that have spoken out. And this is what is missed. And this is why I started off with media always misrepresenting, oh, it's the refugees that, like Taj said, that coming here, taking our jobs, X, Y, Z. And that puts it in very much a different sort of frame, doesn't it? Well, regardless of what their profession is, they are coming from a great deal of suffering. Now, in regards to the work that you do, you've already mentioned, you're not the Home Office, you don't make any decisions. But what is it that the Harbour Project does provide in that case?
I think what we provide is a welcoming and a safe environment for people. So, people have been through the asylum system, and they've been interviewed and they're not believed, etc. There's this whole culture of disbelief. So they arrive at our doors, and in fact, we did a survey one year, and people were saying that what they found the most great thing about Harbour was the fact that people welcomed them with a smile. So that doesn't cost anybody anything, and it just makes you think the kind of experiences they must have had to say that actually just people smiling at us, is huge for us.
So saying that, can you give us an example of the experiences that they are going through?
I think the biggest difficulty for people are, once you're in the asylum system, people have no idea how long that process is going to take.
Can I stop you there, Nan? What is the asylum system? Because I think that's probably, I have no idea. What does that mean?
So basically, when people claim asylum, they have a screening interview, and then they are dispersed around the country. So it can be either into houses of multiple occupancy. Or currently, people have been going into hotels. So then people have to wait for their main interview. And a decision can't be made until they've had their main interview. But because there's been a huge backlog, we've got huge delays on people getting their interviews. So you're basically waiting in limbo, because you're not going to get a decision until you've had that main interview. And there isn't a great deal for people to do. And that's something we try and offer, just try and keep people engaged by offering activities. So, we run different things at Harbour, like English classes, which of course is very important. We do a sewing group, we do a women's group, we've got a football project. So we try and set up activities and things that will help keep people engaged, because again, it's a huge impact on their mental well-being as well, just waiting around in limbo with very little to do. They're not allowed to work. So we also have a Steps to Work program where we try and help people get into volunteering. So some people volunteer with us, and then some people are volunteering at the hospital with different charities, different organisations, which again gives them some hope, and also an experience of what life is like in the UK.
I want to explore the work and the fact that they are volunteering. Just in regards to the asylum system, though, with the fact that there's a backlog, what is the rough wait time?
We don't know. I mean,
I hate that answer. I hate that answer, Claire.
So that's why they're living in limbo, because there is the fact that you are in this organisation, the Harbour Project, and you've dealt with so many services, and yet you still can't say an average, which shows you there is no average.
So some people might get a decision in 6 months. Some people have waited. I think the longest I've experienced here, Nan, is 24 years.
Oh, wow.
And in that time, as Nan says, people live in limbo. You have absolutely no choice and control in your life.
24 years.
24 years.
That is crazy.
And they weren't allowed to work in that time.
You can't work. You live where you're put. If you're living in a house of multiple occupancy, as Nan described, you get a cash allowance of £45 a week. If you're lucky enough to be in a hotel, and we know from the media what a glamorous lifestyle that is, you're in a hotel with £9.10 a week of cash.
You're kidding.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, and on the media, it's like, oh, people are being put up in hotels. They must be living it up. Yeah. But that's not the case. What is it like living in hotels from what clients are telling you?
I mean, again, the kind of things they talk about is the food is, one of the biggest issues, because they can't cook for themselves. So they have to eat whatever's provided for them. And there's a lot of repetitive food. They don't seem to get a lot of variety. I mean, there are people with medical conditions, actually, people with diabetes, etc., who are struggling, with the food in the hotels, because, they often need to eat more often and different types of food.
Do they get assistance medically then? So someone that is diabetic, do they get a GP? They do.
Yeah. Everybody registers with the GP. So when people first arrive here, we make sure that everyone is registered with the GP. They get all their medical needs looked at, by the GPs.
But on the point of food, as Nan's saying there, of the hotels there are in Swindon, there's a number that don't even have a restaurant, a shared facility. So when we say that people are fed, you go down to reception, they microwave you a meal, you take it back and you eat it on your bed. And people have been doing that for 2 or more years.
Oh, wow.
And what is the mental health impact of doing this? Because you're closed up in a room, you get the box standard meal, because that would affect us even if we'd done that for a week.
Yeah.
And people are doing this for years, it sounds like.
I mean, it's huge. The impact on people's mental well-being is huge. And we have a lot of people that come to us and say, that they're really struggling with their mental health. That they're waiting in limbo. They don't know when they're going to get a decision, or even when they're going to get an interview. So again, the kind of activities we offer, does help people with their mental well-being, because it's keeping their minds occupied. I mean, we are very much visitor-led, so we do talk to our visitors and try and find out what kind of things that would help them. So even things like exercise and the football project and all things like that, obviously, clearly helps with people's mental well-being.
I was going to say, in regards to the fact that you are talking, and this is going back to a question Taj asked, and then I always sideline poor Taj, she needs to have a go at me sometimes. But how, firstly, it would be interesting to get an understanding of how bad it was. And I know I'm going back in the conversation, but that was something that I think we need to explore more, because despite the fact that, you've told us that it's such a low amount that they're getting, they've risked their lives getting here. But still, in my mind, I'm like, well, how bad could it have been? And obviously we know that it's awful, it's war-torn. But what kind of stories are you hearing? Just so that our listeners can understand as to how tough it can be out here, because we're sitting here recording a podcast whilst the heating's not on, lucky for us today, but we don't appreciate enough. Can you describe that a bit?
So I'll give a couple of examples. I'm sure Nan can give more. People talking about what it's like to be in a boat. So there was one, we've got a young boy who's about 8 or 9 who recently disclosed to his teacher that he fell in the water when he was coming across the channel, and they had to pull him out of the water and pull him back into the boat. That will be with him forever, won't it? Another chap who was talking about being in a boat and being up to his knees in water, and then the next photograph he shows is of him in full graduation outfit and from leaving university. Another story I remember actually is a family who then got leave to remain and were able to stay in Swindon, and they were a family with a husband and wife and a number of children, and they were offered a new house on one of the new developments, and this family turned it down. And I was and that turning down accommodation is quite a big thing, because it means then you might not get everything else. And I said to the husband, "Why have you turned it down? Because it looks like a really nice house." And he said, "Claire, I can't live there because it's a building site. My children were petrified. It just reminded them of what it was like in Syria when there were holes in the road and holes in the pavement and loud noises and loud bangs." I said, "I can't live somewhere like that. My children are all still sleeping in one room together." So it's not just what they've left. The repercussions of that will go with people forever, won't they?
I didn't expect this, but even I've got tears in my eyes. I can see Taj as well. I don't know how you deal with things like that. That is awful.
Yeah.
I mean, how are you dealing with it as well? Because, wow, that's made me and Bao very teary. But how are you dealing with clients, service users telling you these stories? And wow.
I mean, it is an emotional roller coaster working here, I have to say. I mean, it is, and it is difficult. It's very difficult at times hearing people's stories. I mean, not everyone tells us their stories. As they get to know us and they trust us more, they disclose a lot more to us, and it is difficult. And I guess we have to manage how we deal with it. Obviously, we talk to each other. We have supervision sessions regularly with staff to make sure that people are okay. But I think at the end of the day, what keeps us going and what keeps us motivated is the fact that we know that we are making a difference to people's lives. A couple of days ago, in fact, we had some people. We had 4 men actually who were being sent to another town. I think they had a day's notice to say the taxi was coming in the morning. And they came in to say goodbye to us, and two of the men started crying. And it was just it really hit home to me at that point that actually we have made a huge impact on these people. They said they didn't want to leave Swindon, they didn't want to leave Harbour, they were petrified they were going somewhere where there isn't another harbour to support them. So I think it's those moments that really make you realise that actually, we are making an impact. And even though it's difficult to hear people's stories, we are helping them. We are helping them and supporting them. So, and that is key.
And are there similar projects in other areas as well, like the Harbour Project?
Yes, yeah, there are other organisations, not the Harbour, but
you're not lucky enough if you're not in Swindon, then.
This is also not necessarily.
Yeah.
So the Home Office, local authorities don't have to set up something like the Harbour. We're completely independent from the local council. So sometimes people are sent to towns where there is no harbour equivalent. Mm. And often, actually, we're sometimes a little bit of a victim of our own success. We get phone calls and contacted by friends of people who are in Swindon saying, "You've helped my friends, can you help me? I'm in Crawley or Liverpool or somewhere else." So people do struggle to find organisations who can help.
Yeah.
I'm swiftly moving on. I'm not going to be asking you any more experience. And that's actually led me into my next question, with the fact that I don't want to ask you anymore, because just the 3 stories you saw, we were like, oh my God, it doesn't take much to make me and Taj cry, to be fair. But you've done it. Well done. We don't do that on every podcast. But the fact that we have, as a society in the UK, become a bit immune to the difficulties that people are facing, how does that make you feel? Because you are actually at the front line, having to listen to these stories where you've taken up these careers, and it is a difficult path. I mean, I can say to you right now, I don't want to hear about the experience now because that's too much for me. How does it make you feel that people have become a bit immune in the UK to the feelings of refugees?
Yeah, I think it's isn't it what we often often when I'm describing my work to friends, family, people, and they'll go, "Gosh, that sounds amazing," and so. But I was like, do you know what? Life is not that complicated. It's people. You know, the people we support. You know, we're all, certainly me, very privileged by, you know, the luck of our birth and where we happen to be born. The people who come in every day to see us, we have lovely people, we have some people who are not so lovely, but they're just people who are trying to get on with their lives, trying to bring up their children, you know, live safe lives. That's what they've come to the UK for, or to another country for. They want to get on with their lives and lead safe lives. So it gets really complicated in the media when we talk about numbers and boats and stop the boats and, you know, camps and deportations and all this horrible set of very processy language. It's people. And can we get back to talking about people and their lives and the contribution they want to make and how we would want to be treated as human beings?
So why do you think the media is doing this almost them and us situation?
This is going to turn political, isn't it? I can feel it in my blood. Go for it.
Yes, there always has to be somebody, doesn't there, that we can blame for the country's woes or the country's ills. The numbers that we're talking of are so small, you know. So I say around 75,000 people came to the UK last year. We granted asylum to about 16,000 people. 16,000 people is about the population of Wootton Bassett. So that's what we get so excited about.
But why is it constantly in the paper? I feel like it's happening, I don't know how many times in the day, because it's constantly there. Why?
These are the people to blame for the country's woes.
Okay.
These are the people that we have to blame. And I think another term I get quite irritated about is often we talk about immigration's really broken, immigration's a mess. The immigration is lots of different things. It's tourism, it's people coming for work, it's people coming for study, it's all sorts of things. It's not just about people who arrive on small boats. And interestingly, of the 75,000 people that arrived last year, about 45,000 of those were on boats. That's far more newsworthy than the people who arrived on an aeroplane, isn't it? Here as students.
Who would want to read that? Yeah.
That doesn't quite grab the headlines in quite the same way. So for me, I think it's just a massive decoy and a distraction at the moment from everything else that is going on.
And I think also it's important to point out that you know, often asylum seekers get called illegal immigrants. They're not illegal immigrants. They're actually in a legal process. So, you know, the whole asylum process is a legal process that they're going through. So it's not an illegal process. So, you know, it's just getting people to understand that they are actually going through a legal process. And, you know, they've claimed asylum and there is actually a process that they need to be going through.
Going back to the start. I mean, I go back, forth, left, right every day. If they did come on a boat, and you've said it's a very small number, do they then, when they get to the shores of the green grass, the blue skies of the UK, where it's usually raining, do they then get is it the immigration officers that they meet at the border, or you know how you see in America where they're going from Mexico to the US and they have to, how does it work?
So the majority of people, when they arrive, particularly if they arrive on a small boat or a lorry, people know to use the word asylum as they land on our shores. But other people might be here for other reasons, and I say it doesn't attract the news quite in the same way. We've had people who have, so a number of people who are here maybe as student visas. Okay. I remember a lady talking to her, and she was an air hostess from Iran, and she came. I was on a stopover in the UK and didn't go back. People have been here who are diplomats or other reasons. So people are here in other ways. Okay. But at some point, they need to present themselves to the Home Office and say they want to claim asylum, and that's what starts then the process. I think we also need to say, and again, it gets caught up in the news, you know, whether it's about, you know, barges or disused army camps and how many people are in hotels and all of this sort of stuff. Yeah, and I think at the moment, the backlog, well, when I looked last week, it was 160,000. I'm sure it's a lot bigger than that. So that's the population of Cheltenham across the UK are waiting for their claim. That is not the fault of the individual. So the fact that our asylum system is completely broken, and we would agree that it's an absolute mess, that's not the fault of the people within who are still waiting for a decision from the Home Office. They've come to the UK and asked for safety. They're waiting for a decision. The fact that sometimes that takes 24 years and they need to live in a hotel during that point is not that individual's fault.
And I think also that, you know, it's fine to have an asylum system, asylum process that people can go through, but like decisions need to be made a lot quicker. There's such huge delays on decisions. That's why there's such a backlog, and this is just causing so much chaos and sort of almost despair for people, because they're just sitting in a process that's not concluding, basically.
But Nan, what's causing that delay though?
The lack of decisions, the lack of decision making. The process. I think a few times what's come up is that they've not had enough caseworkers to be looking at people's cases, because each case is looked into. So they have caseworkers. People are appointed caseworkers, and I think on several occasions we've been told that they're taking on more caseworkers. But that whole delay, and I think also during COVID, there was a huge backlog.
So if you just look at the numbers, last year 75,000 people arrived. The UK made, I think it was about 20,000 decisions. So the delta between the two just gets bigger and bigger. That creates the backlog.
You've said that they are part of the asylum system when they approach the Home Office. What happened? So 75,000 came last year. Did you say 15,000 got granted asylum last year?
Yes, about 16,000 people were granted, but they may not have been the people who arrived last year. They're people who are in that long tail of backlog.
What happens to the other? My maths is awful. Are they just in the process, or have they been denied the asylum?
They're the people in there. That sounds like awful. They're people who are still waiting for a decision. Who then are people literally do sit and wait every single day for a letter from the Home Office, some evidence, some post that says what the next stage is. People are just hanging on because you're like a caged bird when you're in the asylum system, because you have so little choice and control in your life about what you can do. So can I live with my, can I move to another town? No. Where, am I allowed to work? No. Can I volunteer? Well, only for this sort of organisation, but not for this sort of organisation. Can I join a gym? Well, I've decided I can afford a gym out of the amount of money that I get every month. Oh, but I need a bank account. Am I allowed to have a bank account? Well, that's a bit tricky. Can I book my own travel ticket to travel to go see some friends, because I've saved up some money to do that? I haven't got a bank account, so I can't book a train ticket on Trainline or National Express. We often find here, actually, and you asked us a minute ago about what it's like working with our folks. People come to work in organisations like the Harbour and volunteer at organisations like the Harbour to help people, and we spend a lot of our time saying no, or just wait, or you're not allowed to do that. So it is a world of no's.
So the irony of the whole system is that there's people that could be working, filling up these posts, because we've got such shortage of people applying for jobs, and so it's not matching up. So obviously the government has not thought this through.
What is your opinion about the current policies that are going through? And I don't know them in depth, so a bit of information would be really helpful, actually, as to why is it in the news, what is going on with the immigration policies.
So yes, there's the new, it's called the Illegal Migration Bill, and as Rishi Sunak likes to call it, it's all around stop the boats. So as you say, the people who arrive by other means are less newsworthy than the people who are arriving on the boats. So I've talked about the number of people who arrive by that route. What we haven't seen is any evidence that various bits of legislation stop people doing that. After we've talked at the beginning of this around why people make the journey, why they leave their homes, how dangerous those journeys are, and the perils people put themselves through. I believe that if you're stood on a beach in northern France and you say, actually, I've just heard that Rishi Sunak there's a new set of legislation coming out in the UK, so maybe I won't go there now, I'll go somewhere else. That's not how it is. People are not that attuned to the latest nuances in our legislation. And also, if you're standing on a beach in northern France and say, there's a 1% chance I might die in the sea, or a 1% chance when I get to the other side I might get deported to a country like Rwanda, people are still going to get in the boat. So in our belief, and certainly from what our people here tell us. So first of all, it's around trying to stop the number of people making that journey. And as we hear regularly about disrupting the business models of the smugglers. I have no doubt that people are making a lot of money out of desperate people. And where there's desperation, there's always people who are prepared to make money out of that desperation, isn't there? There's always going to be a market for that. The other aspect, as well as about the crossings, is about people being held in detention centres. And again, so people, if you arrive on a small boat, you will be forbidden from claiming asylum. Now, again, this all sounds great stuff, but what that means in reality is, because in the meantime, people are going to continue to arrive. The only country that we've got an arrangement with at the moment is Rwanda. So there's no safe route to come here. The only safe routes have been set up for people coming from Ukraine, Hong Kong, and a little bit from Afghanistan a few years ago. There is no such thing as a safe route. So people will continue to arrive. People will be held in detention centres, wherever these are. At the moment, the capacity of detention centres is about 2,500. But that's because people churned through and then moved on to hotels in places like Swindon. So where is this capacity to hold another 50,000 people this year whilst we decide where people are going to go? So the theory is people arrive held in detention, you're not able to claim asylum, you're not able to work, you're not able to access any benefits. I sort of assume that the UK will feed people. So you will have to be housed and fed. So we're likely just to have this mass number of people that are in limbo that we can't actually deport anywhere because we haven't got any arrangements to deport people. We haven't got any sort of legal process, legal framework that allows claims to be assessed. So people just get stuck. So surely, therefore, that's going to cost the UK far more than it does now to keep people in hotels and actually allow people to go on and work. So what we would like to see is faster. We're not here, by the way, to defend the indefensible. If people haven't got a valid claim about why they've made that journey and why they've left that country, that's not our defence. But if and that's why, as Nan was talking of there, why the Home Office have caseworkers to understand the reasons why people left. But what we believe is you should make faster decisions, higher quality decisions. So fewer people we see many people who are refused, and ultimately they are granted leave to remain as they go through the cycle many times, but also allow people to work. Why not allow the many, many people who are waiting in the asylum process, why not allow people to work and use their skills and contribute to the UK?
And what is the reply to that, Claire? Why are they not allowed to?
Well, why aren't people allowed to work? There are some people who are allowed to work, but it's as these things are, once you take the lid off it always gets far more complicated than you like it to be. So there's a list of occupations that people are allowed to do, but then it also then would affect where people can live and their access to things like legal aid. And you also have to have certain IDs that employees would need to see to have a right of work. So it's really, really tricky to get people into work as an asylum seeker. I don't know what the numbers are at the moment about how many vacancies there are in the UK, but it's in the millions, isn't it? And we've got, the average age in the harbour, whilst I said we go from 0 to 72 or wherever we are, the average age is somewhere up in the mid-20s.
Oh, wow.
People are young, fit and able. Yeah. They want to work and contribute.
And why are there safer routes for certain people coming into countries and not for others?
Excellent question. That was one of the questions I wanted to ask.
And I think Claire's like, yeah, I knew you were going to ask that.
Well, as soon as you mentioned certain countries, it was going to happen, really.
My phrase, nothing that's documented elsewhere, as we often hear talk about a hierarchy of worthiness. So it depends on your gender and where you've come from. So if you are, and by the way, I'm not denigrating people who've come from countries like Ukraine and people who've come here from Hong Kong on other schemes. That is great, but it's not equal depending upon where you come from. Somebody said to me last year, actually, when people first started to arrive from Ukraine, if you're white-skinned and Russia invades your country, you're a genuine refugee. If you're brown-skinned, brown eyes, and Russia invades your country, you're not a genuine refugee.
And this is a really interesting point here, because I think this was a conversation we've had privately as to why is it that the UK allows certain people, and we're happy to invite people to live in our houses if they are of a certain colour. And obviously, I am going to take it back. This is a podcast for South Asian people. But it comes down to, I'm going to mention the partition, actually. Because we've heard a bit about that whilst we've been doing the podcast, and it's something that sort of spiked my interest, actually. And it's very similar to what people, and it tends to happen everywhere, isn't it? And the reason people are leaving the countries that it is because of war, more opportunity in the UK, XYZ, and it tends to be the same everywhere. And that's exactly what happened during the partition. What people have to then go through when they come to the UK, from what I understand, is things like racism. And I'm sure the people that you speak to on a daily basis is pretty much the same thing that people like my parents would have gone through when they came to the UK as well. Do they get racism if they are lower down on that hierarchy that you've mentioned?
I mean, we don't hear a lot about racism.
Okay.
We don't hear, we don't get many people talk about racism. Um, we do find that there is often racism within different groups that come to the Harbour Project. So I think, for some countries where there aren't many black people, people do have certain attitudes, which again we challenge, here at the Harbour. I mean, we do challenge that, but I think for people who have come here already settled, we haven't heard a lot of incidents, and I don't know if that's because people just haven't reported it, or their experiences that it's just a way of life, part of the life here. I mean, and that could well be. I'm not sure myself. But certainly, my own experiences were very similar to yours, Val. Again, with my parents coming to the country, the racism we experienced, and I think, and the hope is that things have moved on, and I think they have moved on. But I still think that, there is, especially now with everything in the media, around asylum seekers and people coming to the country, there are fears, I think concerns around, increase in far right activity, etc.
So do you, on
it
that
is,
point, then say, and this is where I'm going to be quite open, do you feel like the media is then gaslighting the people that perhaps would have an excuse to take action, be racist, blame the asylum seekers and refugees? Is there gaslighting going on that the media is doing then? And you can say no if you want, just because you don't want to be open about it. But it is an interesting topic, I think.
Yeah, and I think I don't know whether it's human nature or whether that's then propagated by the governments and by the media, that there always needs to be somebody to blame, doesn't it? And if we look back in our history, when I was growing up, it was all about picketing, and the whole point, the whole downfall of the UK at that point in the 80s was the late 70s and 80s was more about was the fault of the unions, wasn't it? That was the downfall.
Yeah.
Then we had the horrible language in the late 90s about Chavs and Benefit Street and all that horrible stuff, and that was the reason for the country's downfall. And now very much it's around the people who are arriving on the boats.
And also, the funny thing is,
I don't think there's anything funny in this, Taj. I think you need to take this more seriously.
So we've settled as South Asians in this country, but when we see refugees coming over, we're like, why are they coming into our country? Yet we've experienced this with our parents and stuff. Why is this happening? Why are we now thinking, oh my God, why are they coming into our country when we've been through this ourselves?
I think it's because we've become comfortable. We are privileged, and certainly, working at Harbour makes me realise just how privileged we really are. And I think we've got used to our own comforts, and we've become quite materialistic about things, and you want to preserve that just for yourself, and you don't want to be sharing that with anybody else. And I think that's what a lot of it is about. But it is interesting that a lot of people who have come here in the 1960s and came originally for jobs, etc., work that was here, and now turning around and saying that they don't want other people coming into the country. I think people forget their own experiences, and like I said, I think they've become comfortable themselves.
We invited you on the podcast to educate us, and that's the reason we get a lot of our guest speakers. Really, it's about me and Taj finding out more information as to what's going out, but it is also to open the eyes of our listeners and educate all of us as to what's actually going on in the real world, because we aren't seeing that on the TV. And our main listeners will be from the South Asian community. And what information would you like to pass as we come to the end of this episode to those people that haven't realised that the lives that refugees and asylum seekers have gone through, there is a reason that they've come to the UK? What would you like to tell them?
That despite what you may hear in the media, the life of an asylum seeker is not great. Living in a hotel or in a shared house, waiting for years and years for a decision is it's not something that somebody did lightly. There was a definite reason about why people had to do that. And I think, the word I use most actually is just a bit about compassion. I talk in a lot of churches actually as part of my job. And I often say, so you've heard in the sermon, we talk about compassion. Nothing tests your compassion more than this work here. So let's, and it's very easy to say things, as Nan was talking of there, of, this is my life, or why don't people integrate, or why don't they, why don't people do things? Well, one, people aren't allowed to do stuff when they're an asylum seeker, but also when you're living on £9.10 a week, there's not a lot you can do to integrate. So what I'd ask of everybody that's listening really is just maybe open your hearts, open your minds, open your houses a little bit, maybe talk to your next door neighbour, find out a little bit more about people. There's whether we can influence big national policy, that's a whole other debate, but we can all be a bit kinder locally and be a bit more empathetic to people within our local town, in our local streets, about what they've done, why they had to do what they did, and how we can help people be welcomed as part of our community.
Yeah, and I think often we find people come to us and say that that the next door they've got asylum seekers living in the house next door, and as they've got to know them, they realise that they are just like everybody else, like human beings who just want to integrate and want to be accepted. And I think that they just want to be able to be accepted and to be able to get on with their lives. So and Claire's right, it is about compassion, and I think it's about welcoming people. And just showing that we care as well, and that we will take the time and effort to help them.
Lovely. I don't think I've got anything else to add. I don't even need to have a finishing statement there. Love, compassion, and that is something we need to, and educate ourselves. I think it's so important. Thank you so much for joining us today and teaching us about what's actually going on in regards to the refugee and the asylum seeker process. That's the Harbour Project in Swindon. Please do follow their social media. We will put the contact details for the Harbour Project within our link for the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.